I mean, it was raw. They just put a bit of soil on a peat bog. It's only so long before that soil sinks into a peat bog.
Yeah.
And there were sections where you were literally just lean back as far as you could and just hope your front wheel didn't dig in to the point where it just ejected you over the front. I'd done even training with headphones with the crowd noise. I recorded the crowd noise and had headphones in, because it's so different when you train there where there's no one up there.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you've got the noise of all those people. So I felt like I'd kind of ticked every box as to the prep, and then it still never goes your way.
We're back with another MBUK podcast. I'm Tom Marvin, and sat next to me, of course, is Rob Weaver. How you doing, Rob?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
Excellent stuff. Now, in the studio today, we have an absolute legend of the sport, Tracy Moseley. Welcome to the MBUK podcast. Your career, your palmarès has been, it's rather big. So much so that I'm going to have to refer to my notes to read off all of the amazing stuff you've achieved over the past however long. So excuse me for a second. So there's 3 times world enduro champ. You were the world downhill champ. You were 2 times World Cup overall winner. 18 World Cup wins. 16 World Cup wins. 7 British downhill champs. And you've got a 4-cross World Cup in there as well. Is there anything else?
No, that sounds pretty good, yeah.
Any favourites?
It's tough.
It's a lot to choose from.
Yeah. There is a lot to choose from. I think the world champ downhill win was pretty special.
It's 2010.
2010, Mont Saint Anne, one of my favourite courses. That was, but then the enduro one's equally as good, but in different ways. So yeah, I've always struggled to kind of, I guess, choose between those two. They're both pretty cool.
Yeah, okay. I mean, there's a huge amount in there, huge breadth. Like, your career has been. When did you turn pro?
I left university in 2000.
Okay.
So I did a few World Cup races kind of whilst I was at uni, and then from 2000 onwards, pretty much focused on World Cup racing and downhill for a good few years.
Okay, but your first, I guess maybe big, you did Junior World Champs in 97, is that right?
Yeah, I think I actually did one in 95 as well, in Kirchsarten in Germany.
I don't think that was on Roots and Rain.
Yeah, and then, 97 would have been, I think that was a Chateau d'Ay, Switzerland, maybe, if my memory's right, these things, as a junior. And that was kind of the real start for me. I remember finishing second as a junior at the World Champs, and that was definitely kind of something that was in the back of my mind all those years until 2010, to be honest.
Okay.
Knowing how close I'd been to a rainbow jersey and winning a few more World Champs medals along the way until that day. It was a big driving force right from those early years, to be honest.
Okay, so before that first World Champs as a junior, had you done much racing outside of the UK? Where were you in your sort of racing career by that point?
Pretty early on, so I really didn't start until 94, 95, maybe 93, kind of just doing a local cross-country race on the farm at home with the local club. And then the Malvern Hills Classics, which is on our doorstep, was quite a big sporting event on the calendar for mountain biking back in the day then, and did the dual slalom and did really well, I think, in 93 or 94. And then the first year of doing nationals would have been 95 as a junior. So that was all the UK nationals. I did get selected, I think, for Worlds in one of those earlier years, but I was ill, I remember, at the time. So it wasn't until 96, I think, I did my first race in Europe. So it was still early days. I was still at school, obviously. So the odd race in Europe was as much as you get to do in a summer. And the rest was just UK racing, which there was loads of. And it was booming back then. So it was a good place to be racing.
It was. Now, I can't quite remember. I remember seeing you at Cheddar riding for Volvo Cannondale.
Yeah.
When would that have been?
So that started in 97, 98 and 99 was my Volvo Cannondale UK days. So one of those years. Yeah.
Was that cool to be part of?
Oh, amazing.
With like an outside sponsor like Volvo?
Yeah.
I think pretty epic.
It was an incredible opportunity. Although it was Volvo Cannondale UK, I still kind of had the same almost coloured kit and bike, and people were like, wow, you're on that big. It wasn't the World Cup programme. But actually for a UK team, it was it was called the Junior Development Team. Yeah. And actually we had the help of a marketing agency as well. I can't remember the name of the company, but I felt like at that time as a junior, they gave us so many little insights into how to market yourself well, how to answer questions, how to have a good presence and be someone that a company would want to sponsor. And I think the connection with Volvo was, again, it was outside the bike industry. It was just a really, really, good opportunity to kind of put your feet somewhere in something that wasn't just a little shop team. Felt like it was bigger than it was. Clive Gosling was the manager, a figure that's been in the sport for many, many years. It was great fun. Certainly it was an incredible start for me. And I think really did set me off into the right step in terms of how to be with sponsors and how to be loyal and how to look after them and respect them.
Yeah.
And lots of lessons in life I think have really stuck with me.
I was going to ask, did those lessons that you learned, they sort of really help project you all the way through your careers?
Yeah,
useful stuff.
Definitely. I think as well, just being appreciative for those opportunities, making sure that you're always available. Sometimes it's really easy to say, I don't want to go and do that. But all these little things are really important, always turning up for interviews and saying yes. And it just appreciating the opportunity that you're given. And I think sometimes now life's quite different. Kids get so many opportunities and I think they sometimes feel like, I don't have to go and do these things. But I think that it does all matter and it does all kind of go down as like a little ticks against people, how easy you are to deal with and how valuable you make those opportunities and you appreciate it. And I think that was, it stuck with me a long time. I think now I've been pretty loyal. I've only ever had 3 sponsors over the course of nearly 30 years.
That's amazing.
Not quite 30, but so I've always tried to build those relationships, get to know people really well, and it works both ways. Hopefully, there's definitely highs and lows. Some years are great, some years there's not a lot on offer.
Yeah,
but kind of ride the wave and go with it rather than just jump ship constantly.
Do you look back on those years fondly? Because I think it definitely felt like mountain biking was huge. Late 90s with all those outside sponsors, especially brands like Volvo. It felt massive. Do you look back as almost like the boom years?
Yeah, I do. And I think I feel like our generation looks back at the rose-tinted specs of how amazing it was. But I actually do feel like some of that is really true.
Yeah.
It was evolving. It was this cool new cycling discipline. It was on TV. We had Coors sponsoring a dual descender. There was Reebok. I remember that some big names involved. And Ford Focus, when Kona was my next sponsor, and I had a Ford car. I remember getting a yellow kind of gold Ford Focus delivered to my drive at home, living at home after I won the European Champs one year and taking it to uni. And people are like, what on earth is this with this fancy Ford Focus? So there's lots of things like that I don't think you even really get that now, although in some ways there's way more money available now for the top riders and the sport's grown and professionalised so much. There wasn't that kind of money involved, certainly not for someone as young as I was in that part of my career at that point. But the magazines, like we just talked about, was such a big, important part of the whole sport. Getting covers on the magazine was a huge thing. Getting photo bonuses to get in them, going on trips with MBUK magazine, like the magazine and the whole racing thing was like, it was everywhere, and it was such a cool thing. There wasn't the internet, there wasn't videos, there wasn't YouTube channels, so it really was about racing. And I think that's what made the magazines and the racing so important, because it was the only real kind of outlet for what we were doing. And it was the technology evolved, the bikes evolved, the racing evolved.
Because the bikes were pretty crap in the early days.
When you look back now, you think, what on earth were we doing? How did we actually survive on them? So much has changed, and it felt like it was just felt like it was a cool time to see that and to still be part of it now and ride the bikes that we ride now and appreciate so much about them.
Yeah, chainstays on, stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, given that your career has spanned from those real early days up until now, where was the golden age? Would you rather have started your career now with what we've got around, or is it a harder time or an easier time? Or
to be honest, it's hard to know, because I would definitely choose where I started. I think I enjoyed that evolution of the sport. I enjoyed the kind of maybe the fun, the kind of free-spirited nature of it a little bit more, whereas now it is really professional. It's super serious racing. It's tenths of a second, hundreds, thousandths of a second between winning and losing. The pressure that's on you, and also the expectations around being a professional athlete now with social media and all the obligations that you have with that, and how you portray yourself, how you're driven to provide content. And it's just, the world's a very different place now. And I think I just feel fortunate I was around to have those fun years, camping at the races, learning new skills, just being around really fun, lovely people. And it was quite innocent, really, in many ways. We just were all having fun riding bikes. And yet now, obviously, the careers that people are making good money, they're getting maybe more contracts, more chance of exposure on TV, and it's a different world. But I do think I had some good times, and I wouldn't change it at all.
Wicked. Back to the racing. Now, I've got down that you won your first World Cup in Fort William, 2002. Yeah. That must have been pretty special.
Yeah, that was definitely one for the kind of lots of people say, what's your favourite moment? As much as winning Worlds was, because that's one of those massive, achievements and goals you set yourself as an athlete. I think as as a kind of just a memory and as something that's always going to stay with you, I think firstly being the first ever British woman to win a World Cup was pretty cool in the history books. To do it very much unexpected. It wasn't like I was, knocking on the podium even. It was kind of an out of the blue. The weather was pretty horrendous. It was the first World Cup downhill we'd ever had in the UK.
Yeah.
And I think looking back now, when you think of the run we've had of Fort William races and the kind of the history and the part of downhill World Cup racing that Fort William's become, it makes it even more special in many ways. And it was an incredible experience to have a home World Cup that was supported so well over the 10 years that I raced it. I think I won 5 out of the 10, so I had a pretty good relationship with winning in Fort William, and that was amazing in itself because you always knew you were going to have a home crowd support, and it was just amazing to feel like you're getting willed down the course. The atmosphere is something that I'll never ever experience anywhere else in the world racing, and it still blows me away that all these years later people will still travel. Fort William's not like in the middle of the UK. Anyone going there's got to travel probably at least 3, 4, 5 hours minimum to go there, and much more for many people. And yet it's packed, and it was such a passion and such an energy for the sport. It was such a cool place to to be able to race and showcase our sport.
It was a big weekend as well, with Kovarik set the biggest winning margin, didn't it? Yeah,
it was epic weather conditions, and it was.
Yeah, you guys really had to battle, didn't you?
Yeah, if you look back now, how manufactured the course is and how hardcore it is, and if there's a hole develops, someone's got to go and fill it in pretty quick. I mean, it was raw. It was some sections were like going off, the man-made kind of, the hardcore as they thought it was back then, and then you just sink into it's a natural peat bog. They just put a bit of soil on a peat bog. It's only so long before that soil sinks into a peat bog, and there were sections where you were literally just lean back as far as you could and just hope your front wheel didn't dig in to the point where it just ejected you over the front. And that's what a lot of the course was like that. And hence, a pretty historic win for me, but it was conditions where, it all went wrong for Anne Caro, who was the top rider at the time. She was winning everything. And I think she just crashed and got taken out by a big hole, and the door was open for someone else to win. So I kind of got lucky in those conditions.
Good.
But that was what racing was like back then. Yeah. It was pretty wild. The tracks were really long. It wasn't as well maintained, so you weren't getting... there was lots of line choices, lots of opportunities to make time or lose time, whereas now it's so cutthroat and everything's buff. It's got to run fast, and to try and make a gap on someone else is almost impossible. So racing was very different back then, but almost like quite exciting, because it was like just getting down the track sometimes was an achievement, or staying on your bike.
And you were on the Kona at the time, right?
Yes.
So would that have played? Do you think that played into your favour? Bike like that?
Nice heavy bike that stayed to the ground and
kind of just trucked through the holes,
Quite possibly, because those early days with the Marzocchi forks on, that was quite a beast of a bike, to be honest, when you look back now. But yeah, I mean, that was amazing for us as a team as well. That was a kind of a newish team, and I think it really put us on the map with then Fabian joined later on. We kind of became this, quite a big team that was punching way above our weight, I think. But again, a really good opportunity for me to be part of a team like that and get to race World Cups.
Yeah.
What was it like being on a team with Fabian?
It was amazing in many ways. I mean, he was such a precise tactician, let's say, in terms of testing, engineering stuff. He was always pushing the barriers and trying to find ways, and I learned a load following him. Sometimes a bit of an intense character. Sometimes it was, hard to kind of just be able to switch off and just have fun with it. And I think even made some mistakes pushing things too far. And my world champs at Fort William, that was my dream, to be world champion at Fort William, having won their loads.
Yeah.
Fabian and I had been, particularly more Fabian, had been testing out wheels and trying to drill out wheels to make them lighter. And it'd been going fine in testing, but race run hit something within about 10 seconds at the start, getting that was rim done. So my world champs was over. So sometimes there's always that kind of fine line between pushing the barriers of your equipment and playing it safe. But yeah, it was a great opportunity for me to learn loads. Spent a lot of time racing down in France and doing Maxis Cups and racing in Europe, and that's the stuff that really I think brings you on as a rider, is that experience of riding different terrain, being in different cultures. And those are some great times of spending a lot of time racing on the continent and learning the ropes.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, when you keep winning at a venue, does that then make it feel like you've got a target on your back? There's an expectation, because like you're saying, like world champs.
Definitely, yeah.
You obviously went there with one thing on your mind.
Yeah, and it's all those things when you build something up, and I'd spent so much time out there training because it was it's our local course, and it was not local to me, but a home course. And
Quick 10-hour drive,
I'd done a lot of testing with at the time we could wear skin suits, so I knew how much of advantage you have by wearing tight fitting kit, that especially when it's up there, it's quite windy and exposed to the elements. There's no tree cover. I'd done even training with headphones with the crowd noise. I recorded the crowd noise and had headphones in because it's so different when you train there where there's no one up there, and then suddenly you've got the noise of all those people. So I felt like I'd kind of ticked every box as to the prep, and then it still never goes your way. So that's the life of bike racing.
That's hard, isn't
it? In your first, was it 2006 when you got your first World Cup overall? What was sort of that season like? Was it something that was expected? Was the pressure on, or was it a bit like the World Champs where maybe you weren't potentially sort of the top name on the billing sort of thing?
Yeah, I think I'd slowly, obviously that was 2002, it won that first World Cup, and then obviously I think I went to the next race in Marlborough and just crashed my brains out because it was like, it doesn't quite happen. So I think I'd spent those first few years trying to find that consistency, and that was the thing, going from like winning one to then nowhere. And so I think by the time I got to 2005 and 6, I was starting to be kind of generally around the podium-ish. And it was just trying to find that consistency. And I think it was always kind of on the cards, I guess. I think I was also generally that consistent rider rather than I hadn't been winning loads. So I think you just suddenly need to realise just to get those points on the board. But that was definitely a big goal for me. I felt like I wasn't the greatest at doing that 100% all-out performance. I always felt like I practiced better than I raced. And that's, I think, something why I think enduro really suited me in those later years, because I never quite was able to fully let go and commit and just risk everything. So I think the World Cup suddenly became something that I thought, like, this is what I want to focus on, because I know I can do that. I know I can deliver consistent race results. So that was, and it's as a rider's kind of achievement as well. It's always been seen as quite a big one to win, because it shows your consistency. It shows your ability to ride in. It's such different terrain when you travel the world racing as well. Racing in Canada versus racing in Japan and all the places we went to. It's a really cool one to win and show your ability across a whole year. So that was a big one for me in 2006.
I guess it's kind of cool that it really was a sort of a truly global series at that point. Japan must have been incredible. Yeah, Japan was amazing. I remember first doing some stuff in Canada and some of the races on the west coast of America that we went to. It was really cool. And again, as a young person getting a chance to travel the world, doing something that you love doing, that's the part of me that I still almost have to pinch myself to think that I've been to all these places. And even now I talk to my son, he's like, have you been there? I'm like, yeah, I've been there. No way, mummy. And you suddenly realise you've had this chance to travel the world and do something that was incredible at the same time, and go to a beautiful place. It's not just, the tourist spots. You go on to amazing mountain resorts, and what an amazing opportunity. Do you wish it would become a bit like that again in that sense? I do, for the people racing. I think it's a shame we're, even with enduro, I feel like I was again fortunate in those early years of enduro. We went to Chile, New Zealand. Yeah, of course. We really had an amazing spread. We were going to new venues, and that again for me was this massive draw for enduro, because it was super exciting. As someone who'd already raced for 10, 15 years, I was going new venues and going to new places, and it was amazing. And I think that's one of the things that I was getting tired of with downhill, was we were always going back to the same venues. You've been to Fort William, 10 times, which it still happened. All the other venues were the same, and you only get to ride that one track, whereas enduro suddenly gave this open door to ride one area but ride 10 different tracks there or something. So I'd love to see the guys get to travel more and experience it. But I wonder whether they would now. It's such a job, and it's such a serious job, that whether they'd actually get a chance to really take in where they were as much as we did. We spend time and go and visit and do a bit of touristing at the same time, which also made it really special. So you captured that first overall, but then it was 4 years until you got world champs. Did you feel pressure once you'd had that world champs, the overall ticked off, to get that win done? Because obviously you had that expectation in 2007, and it didn't quite come off. Yeah. And then it was just chipping away. Yeah, definitely. And for me, I had this burning desire that I wanted to be world champion. I think that just grew as well. As I didn't think I really set out with that when I was a youngster. I didn't really have a grand plan. Every year I kept thinking, wow, I'm still getting paid to ride my bike. This is amazing. I'm still I just felt fortunate to still be doing it. But at the same time, I think I've always been very competitive, and that was the thought of having that rainbow jersey for me, that iconic rainbow band jersey that you see throughout cycling. I was just like, I want one of those, and that was the biggest kind of draw. So
Worlds was hard in Scotland, and then I think a couple of the venues. The one I really wanted to win was when Steve won in 2009 at Canberra.
Yeah.
I'd even gone out the year before in our winter.
There.
Yeah.
Yes.
To basically go race on the track, to do my homework again, and knowing that I feel like I tried. Thought it suited me. It was pedally. I'd really put some time into getting fit for it. We'd done quite a lot of bike testing. That was then with Trek. And just came short again there. So I think by the end of that point, but then seeing Steve win was amazing in one way, but it was also like, super frustrating.
I was going to say, did you share any of those frustrations with Steve? Because obviously he'd been chipping away for
definitely. And we'd done a
longer.
few things quite parallel in our careers. Like in 2006, might be wrong, but I think we both won the World Cup overall that year.
Yeah.
We also won a World Cup in Fort William at the same time in one of those years, 5 or 6, I can't remember which one. So we'd won World Cups in France. I think when I won the four cross as well that year, we both won a World Cup. So we'd had a few kind of parallel victories, and it was amazing when we did, because it had that whole like got the UK behind you, and it was a really good feeling. We were quite a strong nation at that time. So yeah, to have thought that I could have won at the same time as Steve would have been amazing. But then to see Steve win was, in one way, it was frustrating. I was like, I'm never going to get and do this. But it also thought, well, if Steve can do it after all those times, maybe there is going to be a chance for me. So there's a little bit element of hope that came from that as well, bizarrely. And I think just the following year in Mont St. Anne, to be honest, by then I think I hadn't done any major prep for it. I'd just been like, let's try and treat this as another race rather than really focusing on it. I'd always loved Mont St. Anne as a course. I'd always done well there, really. And I think again, like everything, sometimes a bit of luck plays into your hand. The weather changed massively on the day. I remember having a debate with my mechanic, do I put spikes on, do I not, for the race run, because it just poured down, having not practiced in the wet. And we went for it and just got a bit wild with spikes in a few places, but it paid off. And it's sometimes, you put all this pressure and practice, and you have just got to have a bit of luck, and you've got to, it goes with you at some point. And yeah, just it turned out that's what downhill racing sometimes is. It's like you just have to be there, be in the moment, and go for it. And it worked out for me that year, and there was a massive sense of relief. I think was the biggest thing. I mean, certainly I probably enjoy it as much now looking back on it. At the time, I think it was just like, oh my goodness, thank goodness I've done that. I can now move on, because it does sit there, I think, just eating away at you when you have something that you've wanted to do for a long time, and you're capable of it, but it's just, you've got to everything's got to just fall in the right place sometimes.
Along the way, while you're sort of racing downhill at this period, you were also doing a bit of four cross and stuff at the same time. How did sort of those two different race formats either complement each other or maybe not?
Yeah, I mean, the four cross thing was fun to do. I was never a natural jumper. I didn't really grow up with loads of jumps in downhill races. They evolved as we did in many ways. So I always struggled, but I thought it was good. I needed to get better at it. So a little bit of four cross racing always helped for that. I think it always looks good on the results book, and I always say this to any athletes that I work with now, it's like people don't remember like the conditions or the situation. It's when you win a World Cup, it's in the history books. No one knows whether it rained and you were the one in the dry or whatever. And that was when I actually won that four cross World Cup on my downhill bike.
Did you?
Yeah, it was one where they basically had a grass field in Les Deux Alpes, somewhere like that in France. And it was a bunch of grass turns and a few like drop-offs, and it was just wide open. It was wet grass. I had full spikes on. And it was just a drag race, basically. If you had decent tyres and you got a bit of speed behind you and you could corner well on the grass.
Amazing.
And World Cup four cross win.
Well, you play it down a bit.
Win's a win.
I saw that you also did a clean sweep in Crankworx Whistler 2007. You won like the Air DH, Garbanzo, slalom.
Yeah,
so for someone that doesn't jump,
I could get away with it just about, but it wasn't something I really enjoyed, I have to say. And I'm actually really concerned when my son in another year or two, I bet he's going to be starting to be wanting to do bigger jumps than I would like to do. So you have to come and revisit that all again soon.
But I guess it's a nice sort of segue into the fact that obviously the multidiscipline thing is something that you sort of encourage, and clearly you took on a few mass start or multi-day enduros as well.
Yeah.
When did that sort of begin to build a bit of momentum, or like did it sort of set fire to something in, and you were like, okay, maybe this is going to be the way forward? I
think winning Worlds in 2010 was that career goal tick.
Okay.
I then obviously knew that I wanted to maybe stop downhill, but I wanted to have a year where I could actually wear that jersey, having won it.
Yeah.
So 2011 was my final year racing, and again, pressure's off. Sometimes they always say you have a horrible year in your rainbow jersey, but I had an amazing year and I won the World Cup overall again in 2011. But I knew at that point then that I wanted to move away from downhill. So I then spent 2012, basically had a year where I was like, let's go to Europe and see what this racing's all about. So I did some downhill, I did some cross country, short track.
World Cup cross country, right?
Yeah, did a couple of World Cup cross countries.
2010? That
was after that, 2013 and 14. I did some World Cup cross country.
Okay.
When I was then training for enduro, but 2012 was James and I at the time, my boyfriend at the time, he came from a cross country background, so there was a little bit of influence from him. The riding we were doing was a bit more fitness based. Okay. We did a lot more kind of that kind of riding together. We went to the Alps. We did some mega avalanche. Did a super enduro back in the day when the enduro was already a thing in Europe. It wasn't a World Series by then. So did a super enduro, did a French enduro. Had the best summer ever, basically discovering all these different ways of racing your mountain bike and not just doing downhill down the one run. And I was like, this is amazing. I just loved it. I really discovered like riding in the Alps and the kind of terrain that there was there. And then honestly, just fortunate that in 2013, the Enduro World Series began. And I was like, I want to have a go at that. And I remember being at that first race in Punta Ala in the May of 2013 and there being cross-country X races, Cecile Ravenel. There was, downhillers like myself there. There was a few enduro specialists. Jérôme Clémence had raced pretty much only mega avalanche and enduros in France. Yep. And there was this mix of people from some XXC races from the men's side as well. There was a whole mixing pot of mountain bikers about to take part in this first enduro. And it was like, who is actually going to win this and where's this going to go? And it was amazing. And for me to come out and win that first ever World Enduro was something that I did not expect to do because no one, I guess, really knew where you'd
didn't have a gauge on
stack up. No, yeah. And I remember I hadn't got this memo that everyone was like shuttling up the roads. They booked these private shuttles with the company and we're driving, getting the bikes in the back. Me and James were riding around for hours at the time. And I remember then just like, hang on a minute, what's going on here? But that was something that also really frustrated me about the sport, that I hated the fact that we had to shuttle when we had a bike that could pedal. So I kind of made it my thing then. I remember one year, I think it was the first year I won the World Enduro overall in Finale, where you can drive on the roads and shuttle. I was like, no, I'm going to pedal everything. And I had some massive days and I was like, and still won the race on the day. And it was just like my little thing to kind of like, I really want enduro to be that kind of self-sufficiency event where you don't need a shuttle, you don't need a chairlift, you can go and explore on your own power. And I think the sport's kind of evolved since then. It's gone through a whole cycle and I feel like we're at the point now where maybe it's going to go back that way. And I think that's the appeal for me then of those multi-day enduros, because they were that adventure. Yeah. They were that big day out. They were that you being self-sufficient out in the mountains, getting to ride incredible trails. I love the blind racing aspect too. I love that fact of not knowing where you're going and having to kind of just fly by seat your pants and work it out and look around a corner and look ahead. And I love that style of enduro racing. So I think that's what really has appealed to me about the kind of the multi-day ones, because that's exactly what they are. Just a big adventure. You meet amazing people and you ride bikes in places you'd never ever get to any other way. And
it always seems that you were quite, almost at the forefront when it came to tech. You were quite an early adopter of 29s. I remember you talked me through your bike once and you had a front mech. No one else was running a front mech. You had the Di2.
Yeah, that's when people had already gone to one bike, hadn't they? And I was still staying on a double up front, and that was, again, because I think it was, the tech thing maybe. I think it was more also I looked for an advantage everywhere I could. That's kind of the cliche of the marginal gains thing. But actually there was lots of places I felt like in enduro I could make time. Yeah. And having the double chainring meant that I could climb everything if it was steep in training, in practice. I hate pushing. I felt like I was much better if I could pedal everywhere. Yeah. And then also I always put it in the big ring for a stage, and it made me push that much harder, because suddenly if there was a climb or something steep, I was like, I'm in my big ring, I'm not changing out of here, I'm going to make sure this works. And it almost made me put that extra effort in. And certainly I was, at that point, weirdly, having been a fairly lazy downhiller, winning enduros on my fitness, I would say. That was probably my strength in many ways. And again,
what changed then what do you think changed in you to kind of...
I think James's influence again, coming from that cross-country background, the riding we were doing. I think I loved being out on my bike, not having to rely on anyone else or any other transport.
Because you always had your backpack full of spares.
Food.
You were the most organised person ever.
Yeah. Yeah. I just loved that feeling of me doing it under my own power. Yeah. and like anything, I could fix anything. We'd continue the day, you know, get round. And I love that fact of that preparation part of it. You know, even preparing my snacks, I put a lot of effort into making sure I was eating good stuff and drinking nutrition wise. I loved the fact that there was so many facets to enduro racing that I felt like you could make an advantage on, and you could do things better than somebody else, or think something through that someone else hadn't thought. It just bizarrely, it's a discipline that I think really just suited my strengths and the things I enjoyed about riding. Some good years, really good years.
I think one of the things that sort of stuck out to me, I think you guys had a chat on the Bike Radar podcast a couple of years ago, and one thing you mentioned there was that you were racing with cross-country shoes because of that marginal gains of, well, if you are going to pedal everything, or if you have got like sprints on a stage, actually that stiff shoe maybe doesn't look cool or whatever it is, but actually it's a performance benefit.
There was definitely some even you could change for some stages when you come back to the pits and you're allowed to, or certain days I'd do one day, if it's a pedally day versus down day, I would change shoes. Loads of little things, and I think even with technology in the 29ers, I definitely, you said, the first one to adopt that, but then also even now I sometimes will still take a risk with rolling versus, not so much e-bike racing, but on normal enduro bikes, you know, the guys that are slogging around on full downhill casing, sticky rubber, like it's slow as compared to something that rolls. But there's a trade-off always. So I was always battling that trade-off, and I always went for something that was maybe a bit sketchy grip-wise, but would roll fast, because it was always like, it's free speed. There's all those kinds of things that I just, fascinates me about it. So
it sounds like, much with your sort of early career of being in this exciting world of, you know, downhill progressing, you sort of hit enduro at the best time as well. Yeah,
certainly in terms of that, you know, the newness of it all, and the fact that each year it was evolving massively. I loved the places we went. And I really enjoyed the challenge of trying to keep up with those changes in many ways as well. And again, I'm glad it was then, because it kind of had a phase where it then became very much more like multi-downhill racing. And you know, they weren't doing big epic days. You didn't really need a backpack. You were just on the lift and you were back at the pits, and the bikes became mini downhill bikes. And cool. It's, you know, I still love riding my bike downhill fast. But the bit that I really liked that was different to downhill was that big day out, the big journey, going somewhere new, exploring things. And I think it lost a little bit of that element over the last few years. So again, happy that it was part of those early years where I was kind of at my best and really enjoying it.
But you clinched 3 overall titles. At that point, did motivation sort of drop off a little bit? You kind of done it all.
Well, I think it was hard, because I was loving it, but at the same time I kind of was ready to finish after I'd really raced downhill. It was like I kept kind of wasn't planning on doing the enduro thing, and I think James and I at that point been together quite a few years. If we were going to have a family, it was like, when does this happen? You know, I didn't really start enduro racing until I was in my, what would I have been, mid-30s. So I was already, the clock was ticking in that respect. And I thought, right, I really need to, I also wanted to end on a high. That was always one of the things I kind of said to myself. I wanted to make sure I didn't just keep racing and dragging it out a bit too long, that I started to then get injured, make mistakes, or just lose that ability that I had. So that was an important thing for me, to kind of feel like I left on my terms, I would say. But saying that, I've never really left. So it was like, I always said at the time, I'm retiring from, you know, full-time racing, but I always knew deep down that I've got such an inbuilt desire. I love bike racing. I love racing my bike. I love challenging myself, that I'd always want to race in some way. So I knew it wasn't going to be an end, but it was an end of doing it professionally, let's say, and that being my sole focus. And obviously having a family was something that, if we could have, we wanted to do. It was just needed to make the time and space for that to happen.
Where along on the sort of this journey did the whole team of racing thing? So you've done your racing, and you've spent a lot of the last few years, or certainly period of time, helping other people come and race. You know, there's some fairly hefty names in that as well. You know, we've Hattie, for example, Evie. You know, like, you've been involved in the scene pretty well. Yeah, so that started really. So in 2013, 14, I would say, I was getting involved with the British cross country programme as a technical coach, and I'd done a little bit of work travelling to the cross country races with the juniors, just helping them with their skills. Phil Dixon, who was the head of the mountain bike programme then, was my coach, so he was helping me, and he was one, again,
the reasons why that kind of fitness changed, and suddenly I became, a much fitter athlete than I was, and the pedaling was important. And he was involving me a lot in their training camps, but coming along as a technical coach, but also for me to benefit from training with those riders. And at the time, that was amazing for me, because it suddenly gave me this realization of just how hard cross-country riders train and just how much they're in the hurt box a lot. And it made me such a better rider for it. And at the same time, that whole program of British cycling with cross-country, there's that Olympic pathway, obviously. So there's funding for youngsters to come into the sport. They get an amazing opportunity, of support they get from Manchester-based academy there. And then they go on to get a chance to race, and they hopefully go on to represent GB at the Olympics. But like in all these kind of talent pathways, there's quite a big, let's say, I suppose it's not castaways, but like people that don't make the cut, let's say, people that aren't going to make it for whatever reason. And there was a few times I was thinking, God, there's some of these riders I really wanted to, they're really talented, but and I kept saying, why don't you try enduro? Why don't you try downhill? Because maybe cross country is not your thing, but doesn't mean that's the end of cycling for you.
Yeah.
So at the time it was like, I actually helped Phil with with a couple of people. Alice Barnes actually was one of the first ones who went on to an amazing road career. But I also was doing a lot of work with the local cycling club and wanted a way of kind of fostering that talent within the local cycling club. And that's when the likes of Evie came along as a youngster on the hills, and you could see straight away the talent that she had. She was an incredible hockey player, just a natural athlete, and had this incredible desire to want to be the best at something, whatever that sport was. And mountain biking for her obviously was one of the things that she chose and has excelled at, and gone above and beyond I ever expected, in terms of what she's achieved. And then Hattie was the same, just another youngster in our club, and it was really evident to me that she had an incredible amount of skill. And people that weren't even on Timo, Ella Connolly was one of the girls that was on the GB programme, who was having a real tough time with cross country, and I lent her an enduro bike and said, let's go and enter this race, and got her to race an EWS in Italy. And Martha Gill was another one. So they're all kind of like ex cross country programme riders that you can see they've got a talent, but they just haven't quite ticked that box. And I kind of really enjoyed being able to share that passion for my love of cycling to them, and just say, look, it's not the end of your road just because this doesn't work. There's so many other ways you can ride your bike. And I think it's ace now to see what Martha's done with the whole free ride scene and what she's found her niche. And Ella's found her niche. And I just think it's opened the door. And I think that's what's exciting right now about cycling and for women's cycling. There are so many opportunities. And the Timo thing was just something that I enjoyed being able to do and had to put a bit back. And in many ways, it kept me fit enough to try and ride with them, and it kept me involved in that way. And it gave me a huge motivation to have to get out and ride, to be able to ride with Evie and Hattie at home. I mean, now it's just get pummeled, but I've got an e-bike, so I'm all right. But it was ace, and it was so nice to have an outlet. I got a lot of help when I was a youngster from Helen Mortimer back in the day. So it was almost like history repeating itself for me. It felt like a perfectly natural thing to do. And I mean, the girls have done way more than I ever expected them to, so it's been amazing. It
must be amazing to sort of, when they have achievements, to sort of, I don't know, like I'm never going to, sort of be part of anyone's achievement, but it must have been an amazing feeling to see those.
It's amazing. And I think I've been so lucky that still being involved, with the teams, and obviously opened the door for both of them to get sponsored by Trek, which has allowed me to still kind of have that, I guess, access to them in some ways, even though they live locally as well, but to still be involved in the teams they're with. And to be there when Evie won Worlds the first time in 2021 at Val d'Isole was just amazing, because it was kind of a bit of an unexpected race, and I was out there cheering at the top of the hill and just like, oh my goodness. That was really cool. And then to be there when Hattie won the first World Enduro, and then again this year winning the overall, and that was really special in many ways, because I felt like it was like that handing over the baton, like I was the first British winner of a Enduro World Cup overall, and there hasn't been another British one until it's been the French have dominated until now. So now it was like, it's ace, it's back in the UK, and it's even more ace that it's someone that was from my hometown. So definitely a good kind of closure of that chapter for sure.
Do you see a wealth of talent coming through in the junior ranks as well? Is there another sort of generation coming through that you can see?
I mean, I think we've got some really good talent as ever. Certainly locally for me, since having Toby, my son, I've not been as involved in that local scene. And I do believe there is plenty more of those kind of young talents out there. It's just opportunity sometimes. It's having that club and having that opportunity, and having the chance to train with a group, like a like-minded group. And that is something that I hope in the future, when I have a little bit more time, I'd love to get back involved in that kind of grassroots scene at home. We've had a few races on the farm at home, and I'd love to kind of foster more of, not necessarily to go on and be champions that those guys have been, but just to to share that love for cycling. And that's what I'm enjoying now with my son being at school and starting to encourage a bike bus to school and all the other little things that I've been trying to bring cycling into people's lives that just don't realise it exists. And that's ace, and I just want to have time to be able to do some of that stuff.
Now, you've already said that you're super competitive, and we know you've kind of stepped back from full-time racing, but you've still been dabbling with a bit of e-bike stuff.
Yeah.
How's that been going?
It's been great. And again, that's been my outlet for, my bit of racing that I still love to do.
Yeah.
Been fortunate enough to be working with Bosch as an ambassador for the last few years. So it was, it's been amazing to be able to kind of race their motors, being one of the best out there in terms of racing, and a lot of the technical stuff and some of the power stages that we get in the e-bike races has also allowed a new element of skill that I've needed to improve upon. You think I've been racing bikes for so long. I feel like I've got a whole new challenge now with e-bike racing, because it takes a different skill set to ride. You've got to learn how to control that power, when best to apply it, how to get your weight in the right place to make sure you're not getting the wheel spin. And even the climbing stages, like it's a whole new way of riding. And I've loved the fact that it's given me another challenge at this point in my career to get on with it. Again, it's not something I've been able to give as much attention as I'd like to have done. I'm definitely not as fit and don't train as much as I probably would like to be as competitive, but I've still been able to be relatively competitive and with the minimal time on the bike, and love to see the evolution of it. Like, it's one of those things I still don't quite know where it's going to go and where it's going to take us, but it's being at that forefront of something again that's new and evolving, and it's exciting. And I think to do the e-Tour de Mont Blanc was a 3-day e-bike race around Mont Blanc that I did with Natalie Schneider, a Swiss girl, in 21, was it? Or 2020? It was just after COVID. Was still probably one of the best experiences I'll ever have on an e-bike or on a bike, because it was it was epic days. We had 4 batteries in a day. We had a battery in our backpack the entire time, which again, now I look back on it, I think how dangerous. You would not want to do that ever again. And the weight of it was horrific.
Yeah.
But we went miles. We went everywhere, and it was just incredible. And now you look back and think, well, that's stupid. We were actually hiker biking up a chain, like in the Alps.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Via Ferrata, passing the bikes up this thing to get up and over a pass. Just
with an e-bike.
Amazing.
Yeah, nice and conveniently light. Yeah, easy.
Thankfully, Natalie was a strong ox and she helped me out, because I was dying just from a bit of altitude as well that day. It was a big adventure. But all those things, that pioneering stuff, I love about it. And I love being able to work with Bosch and help the whole kind of evolution of how we view e-bike racing, how we view e-bikes. I mean, it's still very much a taboo. People are like, e-bikes. There's lots of grumbling around it, and I still love riding my normal bike and my e-bike. I'm definitely not going to ever stop that, because they all have their different, I guess, benefits in many ways and times you want to ride them. And I love just trying to feel like we just need to educate people and just being nice humans and riding bikes in a manner, in whatever bike it is, that appreciates other people out there enjoying the outdoor space. And that's the bit that I just think, it's not that hard to get, that we don't need to have the stigma around it's an e-bike or it's not. Someone's out on a bike, getting fresh air, enjoying exercise. Let's be happy. Let's celebrate that, not worry about whether it's an e-bike or not, or how. So those are the kind of things I feel quite passionate about, that I want to be involved in. I want to be showing that someone like, who's had a career like myself, can still be involved in doing something that's I think it's got a lot of good. It's got so much potential to open the door for cycling to the masses, which would be amazing for our sport.
How do you feel about the changes happening next year with no e-bike racing? Yeah,
it's definitely tough. I think the whole cycling racing, the bike industry's, obviously having a hard time at the moment. So I think there's going to be change happening. I think the racing side of things, again, it's just evolving. We've seen the sport grow to such a level. I think it's hard to really say where it's going to go. I think the e-bikes will definitely stay. I just think there needs to be some consolidation around what the e-bike racing looks like. And I think there is going to be racing in Europe happening, but just not on that World Cup level. And I think that's fine. I think it sometimes doesn't necessarily all have to be one size fits all. Do
you think they're bringing more rules and regs around motor power, battery capacity, stuff
they're
like
going to
that?
have to, but it's like, how do you do that? Because it's such a huge kind of worms with so many different, different manufacturers, different ways of testing them. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done there. But I ultimately think there will be e-bike racing happening, because there's a lot of people riding e-bikes, and there's always going to be a small percentage of people who want to race, who want to better it, and the brands want to evolve their technology. And racing's always, you look at Formula One, you look at all the sports, they always have to have some pinnacle as to where they can test the stuff they're doing. So I just think it's just early days, to be honest, and finding its place. I think the same with racing. We're going to see what the new system looks like with Warner Brothers Discovery, with that really high elite level kind of race series. What that looks like in a few years' time is how that then affects the trickle down. And I honestly feel we're going to see an input into grassroots racing. There's going to be a need for that to grow, and I hope it will. I'd love to see the UK National Series thriving again, even regional races thriving, and this, because ultimately only ever a few people are going to get to race that high level, but a whole bunch of other people can race at other levels and really enjoy the sport. So I just think we're in a kind of an interesting time where things are moving and changing, and sometimes everyone gets really negative about it, but I also think we just got to think, okay, we have to change with the times. There wasn't e-bikes, there wasn't suspension. The bikes we had, so much has happened in such a short space of time that it's a process and a pattern, and I think it's exciting to see what's next.
Cool.
How do you said that time right now is maybe not so available, but going forward, how do you see yourself being involved with the sport on a bigger scale in the future?
Yeah, something that I keep thinking, wow, I'm still in my mid-40s now, and I'm still, being able to be relevant at the races. I'm still enjoying riding my bike. I'm still competitive. It's amazing. I feel really fortunate to be there. And I still feel like I've got a lot to give, and I still feel really passionate about the sport in many ways, whether that's, in the next few years being back at the races and helping out with team management. It's something that I've enjoyed doing. And I think as time allows and the calendars grow, I think people are going to have to kind of share those roles sometimes. There's so many races now across such a wide range of the year. I don't want to be away for 20 weeks from my family, and I don't think many other people do. So I think there's going to be lots of evolution of how the staff manage those teams and how riders also manage their races. You can't race for that long and hold that form. And I also think as Toby, my son, grows up, there's so many opportunities there where I feel like I can share my passion for sport within the school, the mums, the young kids, and just really feel like I want to be an advocate for making sure that cycling is enjoyed by the masses and done in, like I say, in a nice way and shared. And so lots of places I feel like I would love to get involved and just see how it works out.
What about racing?
And there'll always be a bit of racing. Always be a bit. I still, would love to do a few more multi-day races. Some of the places I've not been to and races I've not done. There's still a few on the bucket list. I did the BC bike race this summer, which was been on my bucket list for a long time. Yeah. It was a cross-country one. So I don't want to ever kind of, pigeonhole it's got to be just e-bikes, or it's only going to be enduro. I've done the Cape Epic. I've done all sorts, and they're all amazing. They've all got incredible, memories for me. And I'd like to kind of have one each year of something like that I have as a bit of a goal to tick off. Again, motivation for me to stay fit, stay healthy, and for me to train for, because we all find it hard as we get older to kind of prioritize those things. So having a race or a goal is always really important for me. I'd love to support some more grassroots racing and be racing in the UK and get that club structure going and just get involved at both levels of the sport. I think it'd be really cool.
So I think before we sort of finish, I was wondering if you could bring it back to the bikes. And I was going to ask, if you could have one bike from now, what would you keep? And if you could have one bike from the whole of your career, which one would you sort of take to a desert island?
Oh, goodness. Right. One bike that I've got now would probably be my Top Fuel, actually.
Really?
It's quite a short travel bike.
The new one?
Quite a short travel bike. It's like 120, 130... 140 just about. You get away with it maybe. So it's that mid-range, but I just think it would do everything I enjoy doing, because I still do like doing some gravel road. You can kind of do everything on that, really. And a bike from the past that's like a cool memory. Ooh. Do you know what? I think I probably would take. It's the Remedy 29er was the one I won Punta Ala on. And I got in a lot of trouble for winning on that bike because it hadn't even been released at that point. And it's one of those things that, take this, but don't win on it. Oh, sorry. Just because I think the start of the enduro career for me in that first race in Punta Ala was quite a turning point for my riding and just my love for adventures on bikes. And I think I've never ever ridden anything other than a 29er since then.
Wow.
Pretty much. It was like such a big change. It just, such a cool bike. I loved it.
Wicked. What an
it's
answer.
actually hanging in Bike Park Wales, that one.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's
if I get
yours
it back
and
from then.
Valley Holes, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as they don't Take it away. That'll be mine.
Oh, great stuff. Well, thanks ever so much for coming in.
No
Really
worries.
appreciate all sort of your insight and stuff on from your career. It's been an incredible chat.
Yeah, amazing.
And obviously quite the career as well. So, and long may that sort of continue. It's been really interesting thinking your thoughts into the future. But yeah, thanks ever so much for watching the MBUK podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and iTunes. And if you're listening to it on Spotify and iTunes, you can subscribe to us on YouTube as well.
Crazy. Who'd have thought?
2024.
Wow.